today's service we have something very, very special lined up for you guys. Tenemos algo súper especial para ustedes en esta mañana. Nosotros como iglesia siempre hemos tenido la oportunidad de compartir con ustedes nuestro testimonio como pareja. Some of you guys personally know this. Algunos de ustedes saben esto. Algunos de ustedes no saben o no conocen de dónde hemos llegado. So some of you guys know us as a couple, or you guys know Melvin and Ash as just Melvin and Ash, you know, the couple that just got married a month ago. But there's so much behind their story. Hay mucho más detrás de su historia, hay mucho más detrás de la historia de Andrea y mía que queríamos compartir con ustedes, that we wanted to share with you. So today we wanted to do something very special and different that we've never done before. And we have titled today's sermon or session as Visible Love Stories. Can you guys give it up for Visible Love Stories? So what we want to do today is we want to make this very, very casual and formal, but let me encourage you or let you know something, that this is not just conversations that we're going to have, that we have been praying for this. No solamente son conversaciones que hemos tenido, pero que hemos orado por esto, hemos estado pidiendo la dirección de Dios para que Dios nos utilice para compartir nuestra historia, so that God could use us to share our story, and that it could be encouraging for you guys to live a Christ-centered life, or to have Christ-centered relationships. So before we get started, I would like to pray, and then from there, we're going to start getting to know a little bit more of who Melvin and Ashley is. So if you guys could join me in prayer. Father God, we are in your presence, Lord. Lord, today we've taken this time to share our testimonies. Lord, we know that those that God has done something amazing in their lives, it is impossible for them to not share, to not speak about where you've taken us. And we want to do that this morning. We want to honor you. We want to honor the cross. We want to honor Jesus. We want to honor what you've done for us and for our relationships, Lord. So let your Spirit manifest itself in this morning. Que tu Espíritu se manifieste en esta mañana y que nos traiga luz, que nos traiga dirección, que nos traiga convicción. Te pido todo esto en el nombre de Jesús. Amen, amen, amen. So what we're going to do is, first of all, I want to introduce Melvin and Ashley. Para aquellos que no conocen a Melvin and Ashley. So Melvin and Ashley both came to Visible in different seasons of their lives. They did not come together. They met actually at Visible. So I would like for everybody to kind of know your Visible story. So what I would like to do is for you, Ash, because you got here first, tell us how you got to Visible.
So it was about almost 5 years ago. I was living in Tampa, and I had decided to leave my mom's house and move to Orlando. I was like, all right, I don't know anybody. I don't have like any church that I plan to visit or anything like that. So it was very new for me. And I remember going to look for churches once I moved here and not finding something that I felt comfortable in. I wanted something when I moved here. I wanted something to call home. And I couldn't find that anywhere. And I kept looking for churches. It was a constant for like a year when I first moved here. And I think that I kind of just gave up on the whole church scene. I gave up on looking. I couldn't find anything. So I decided to just kind of stop. And one day I remember meeting or sitting down with Jonathan and some other people, and them saying, oh, we're going to open a church. We're so excited and we want you to be a part of it. So I was like, okay, all right, let's see. So I remember going to one of the first intra-socials, and I remember Jonathan saying the mission and the vision of the church, and he also said something about Chick-fil-A, and I was like, oh, right there, this is my church. So I was like, all right, it sounds so interesting. Everything that he had talked about in like the intra-social, his mission, his vision, it captured me, and I started to come to Visible more often, the intra-socials, and since day one, I've been here, and it's been a blessing to my life.
Yeah, amen. So Melvin's story is a bit different because Melvin got to Visible by a completely different scenario. So I know the scenario, but Melvin, share with us what was your Visible experience?
Yeah, todo entienden en español, ¿verdad?
Sí, somos boricua aquí, somos nacionales.
Flujo mejor en español. So basically, wow, eso fue, no me acuerdo el día exacto, pero básicamente yo conocí a Josué y a Alex en mi trabajo. So basically ellos van al trabajo, y a todo esto, en ese momento yo no estaba trabajando en operaciones, ahora yo estoy en operations, pero yo estaba en el floor, yo era vendedor, y entonces pues yo me los encuentro en la entrada y como que mira, ¿qué están buscando? Y ellos estaban buscando una batería.
Esa batería.
Yo vendí esa batería. So, basically nada, comenzamos a hablar y todo lo demás. Ellos vienen solamente a mirar. They were looking for, for drums and stuff. So, I was like, como que le doy la información y todo lo demás, le di el precio y dice, mira pues, brutal, no tenemos los chavos, pero vamos a volver mañana con nuestro pastor. Josué viene y dice, no, él está puesto para el problema, el pastor es joven como nosotros, bro, y ya tú sabes, él está puesto para gastar, para poner el billete ahí, ¿no? Brutal, qué bueno. So, nada, al otro día pues se da de que ellos vienen, cumplieron su promesa, yo estaba ahí con ellos, y mira, brutal, vinieron, y al rato viene Jonathan. A todo esto pues comenzamos nada, a hacer la transacción, y yo comencé a hablar con Jonathan, basically él pues comienza a hablarme pues, de que básicamente me estaban hablando de que estaban abriendo la iglesia y todo lo demás, que era una iglesia reciente, que estaban buscando equipo y todo lo demás. En ese momento yo llevaba más o menos, ya como había cumplido creo que un año, no, medio año, así como 6 o 7 meses llevaba ya acá, acababa de mudar de Puerto Rico, so basically yo estaba todavía en ese proceso también de buscar iglesia. I was looking for churches, and de momento, pues Jonathan me dice, mira, pues esta iglesia, Visible Church, me dio el location, me da su Instagram, de momento me sigue, comenzamos a compartir historia, y lo loco es que Church of God, ¿verdad? Que es aquí en Estados Unidos, es lo que le llaman Mission Board ahí en Puerto Rico. So, yo he estado toda mi vida en Mission Board, en Cocina Mission Board, y pues comenzamos a compartir historia y comenzamos a linkear ciertas cosas, y dice, mira, como que tú conoces a esta gente, tú conoces a el otro, y comenzamos a... Y ahí pues, de momento pues, en ese proceso, conozco a Ashley, pero pues ahí básicamente yo llego a Visible, pero eso pues, voy a entrar ya mismo en eso, pero ya básicamente ese fue el encuentro, fue como que super crazy, porque no sabía que iba a llegar a esta iglesia y hasta su debut.
So, by the way, no sé si tú sabías esto, pero el día que Josué y Alex se fueron de Guitar Center, Josué me llamó super pompeado. Josué called me like super hyped. He's like, dude, I met this guy, Guitar Center. Oh, he's awesome. He doesn't have a church. We need to recruit him. And I was like, nah, dude, relax, He's like, no, we need this guy. We need this guy. And I was like, okay, fine, cool. We'll talk to him. He's like, no, you gotta get to know this guy. And literally, when I got there, I don't know if you remember, but he was like, Melvin, this is my pastor. This is the guy I told you about. He was like he was just dying to get like an interaction. So, but I know that it was through that connection that you kind of lead into the next phase of kind of how you met Ashley. So, kind of how was it that you connected from that initial connection of us getting to know each other to you meeting Ash?
Exacto. So basically, yo esa misma noche. Yo, pues, cocho, déjame ver la iglesia, los comienzo a seguir en Instagram, obviamente sigo a Pastor J, entonces cuando yo entro, yo pues, obviamente normalmente cuando tú entras en una página de Instagram, tú comienzas a ver las fotos, comienzas a ver los highlights, stories que tienen por lado y todo lo demás. Cuando yo entro a un highlight específico, estaba Ashley y estaba Andrea, y realmente estaban anunciando alguna promo de alguna actividad que tenían en Pizza Kitchen. Así mismo hicieron, y de momento como que cuando yo veo a Ashley, I was like, just cute, como que, pero con esto como que pues no lo conozco, yo no lo conozco, so, de momento me tomé el atrevimiento de esa misma noche darle follow yo veo bien cómico, porque yo veo básicamente las personas que están siguiendo la iglesia. So, cuando yo veo y empiezo a ver las fotos, yo veo que esta foto es de la muchacha. So, cuando yo entro ahí, veo a Ashley. Y yo dije como que, como que la seguí. Y pasó un tiempo, pasaron varias horas y ella no me seguía. So, maybe yo creo sí que tomé un paso apresurado, déjame unfollow. So, yeah. Exacto. So, yo la dejé de seguir, pero de momento dije, ¿sabes qué? So, le di otra vez follow. Y creo que fue un día ya.
I finally, after a couple days, added him. I was like, okay, he's kind of cute.
Exacto, entonces ahí ella me sigue. Basically, no sé si fue la misma noche que tú me. Exacto, yo creo que fue la misma noche que ella me siguió, o quizás otro día, yo creo que fue otro día, no fue la misma noche, yo no soy tan psycho. So, al otro día, vamos a poner al otro día, porque escuchamos bonito. So, al otro día, basically, ella puso un story de su sobrino. Y entonces yo le pongo como que, le doy como que un react, una carita de corazones. Y digo como que, vida de tío, es muy linda, yo tengo dos sobrinos, ¿verdad? Y entonces, hermano, desde el...
Eso, by the way, eso siempre funciona, ¿verdad?
Sí, guys. Yeah. So, nada, desde ahí hasta el sol de hoy.
Can you tell them the compliment or the question that you asked Ashley?
Like, what was the age of the...
De momento sí, porque yo vengo y le digo como que mira, ¿cuál es la edad? A todo esto yo estoy enfocado literalmente, genuinamente estaba enfocado en su sobrino. Yo vengo y le digo como que, ¿cuál es la edad? Y ella viene y dice, 22. Y yo, no, yo creo, entonces ahí yo veo que ella se confunde y me dice su edad. So it's like, no, de tu sobrino. Entonces, oh my God, como que, I'm sorry. Y yo dije, pues gracias, porque ya me diste algo que yo te iba a preguntarle en algún momento. No, ya me contestó eso sola. Ya, y hasta el sol de hoy, estamos aquí.
So, one Sunday, all of a sudden, Melvin shows up and we're like, oh my gosh, this is the guy from Guitar Center, and we're like, oh, viniste a la iglesia, qué bueno, we're here at church. And all of a sudden, he gets there and he sits next to Ashley, and all the guys were like, whoa, wait a minute, what's going on here?
Ya en ese momento, exacto, y en ese momento creo que habíamos ya tenido nuestra primera
cita. Yeah, our first dates. But I remember when I saw him for the first time, I was like, como que, I feel like he followed me, and then unfollowed me, and followed me again. And so when I'm looking at his page, I'm like, okay, he's kind of cute or whatever. But when I scroll up, when I'm going to follow him, I'm like, okay, he's friends with Jonathan and the church, so I guess he's okay. If I need a background check, I'll just ask Pastor.
So that Sunday she comes and she's like, hey, I got a question to ask you. Do you know this guy named Melvin? And what are your thoughts? And I was like, Melvin? I don't know Melvin. And then, we kind of connected the dots, and I was like, oh yes, I actually do know Melvin. So, and I told her because of when I connected him. Everyone that knows me knows that I don't like recommending friends to anybody that's dating, because I just don't like it. But there was something about Melvin that reflected a man of character and a man of integrity. And I told her, I said, look, I only met him once, but I think he's a good candidate. So, and then, they're married now, but let me tell you something. A lot of people see stories like this where, you meet someone and, you start getting to know them, you start dating them, but people don't really take the time to know, like, the background, So I want to ask you a question, like, for you, and I'll start with Melvin. What was your perspective of love before you met Ash? Like, what was your before Ash story?
Yeah, so basically, era bien vaga la perspectiva que yo tenía, ¿verdad? Del amor, de quizás conocer a alguien, ¿verdad? No, nadie, yo creo que nadie aquí conoce mi background. Yo estuve para el 2000, yo me mudo aquí para noviembre del 2018, 2018. En ese mismo año, en mayo, yo estuve a punto de casarme. Basically, semanas antes, la persona con la que iba a casar me canceló la boda. So, todo se paró. Eso fue básicamente de los hard seasons que he tenido en mi vida, porque fue, obviamente, en ese momento era una persona que amaba, una persona que obviamente literalmente me iba a casar. Tenía todo, teníamos todo, ya todo estaba listo, simplemente todo se canceló así porque sí. Y basically pues, fue un proceso duro, caí en un proceso duro de depresión, baja autoestima, ¿verdad? Fue un proceso de mi vida en donde yo le dije al Señor, yo no vuelvo a conocer a alguien, ¿sabes? No quiero, porque si es para esto, ¿sabes? ¿Para qué? Yo no. So, a la misma vez que yo pude pasar ese proceso en donde lo perdí todo, fue uno de los momentos donde más cerca pude estar de Dios. Yo creo que es bien importante reconocer esas temporadas en donde caes en el fondo más hondo en tu vida y ver cómo literalmente Dios permite que eso pase para volverte a recoger nuevamente. So, cuando pasa eso, yo me comienzo a meter bien brutal con Dios en la palabra, a hablar mucho más que cualquier otro momento en mi vida. Y comencé, literalmente, dejé que, ¿verdad? Ese proceso Dios me comenzara a formar nuevamente con un nuevo carácter, ¿verdad? So, cuando pasa eso, se me da la oportunidad de venir para acá. Y yo dije, ¿sabes qué? Yo creo que esto es una puerta que Dios me abre para literalmente comenzar de nuevo. So, básicamente fue literalmente Dios abriendo todas las puertas, literalmente una broma empezando desde el trabajo. Yo llegué aquí en noviembre 4 y en noviembre 5 yo estaba trabajando. So, básicamente yo vi las diferentes señales que Dios me ponía and sí, básicamente me muevo aquí por obediencia. Y llego aquí por obediencia y algo grande, algo mayor Dios tiene para mí. Yo no lo veo ahora, pero sé que va a llegar y sé que mis ojos lo van a ver. Pero en ese momento, cuando llego acá, ¿verdad? Obviamente pues todavía en lo humano, la duda, el temor de comenzar a conocer a alguien, pues sí podía decir que de momento yo en una le dije a Dios, si tú me quieres solo, soltero toda mi vida, dímelo y yo lo voy a hacer. ¿Sabes? Porque yo no quiero volver a sufrir, yo no quiero
Gracias
volver
a Dios que no...
yo no quiero volver a pasar por una decepción como esa, pero sí, obviamente estaba en el proceso, yo le dejé literalmente todo en las manos a Dios, en todo, ¿verdad? Todo eso de, ¿verdad? De una relación, de poder conocer a alguien, alguien que, ¿verdad? No cumpliera las expectativas, sino como que tuviera esas cosas específicas que ya de antemano yo le pedí a Dios que debe tener una mujer para poder estar a mi lado, porque si no yo no iba a confiar. Y ya, aquí.
Pero tú sabes que es súper importante que dijiste que, and I think that this is something super important that I think that people don't understand the amount of damage that a breakup can do to a person.
Yeah.
You know, I think that at times we see people that are, you know, that went through a breakup, and at times you could be a bit insensitive towards them because we're like, dude, just get over it, you know, or just stop thinking about that guy or that girl. But even hasta las personas educadores saben or psychologists say that, you know, a long-term relationship or even a marriage that breaks, especially an engagement that breaks, it's like you're losing a person. It's like, you know, you go through a grieving process. So I feel like at times you can be a bit insensitive towards seasons like that, and also to understand where that takes you. You know, it takes you to a point where you said, you know, it takes you to a valley where you're, especially if you're in your walk of faith, especialmente si estás en un caminar de fe que te, you know, you start questioning like, why me? You know, why is this happening? Also, if you're in ministry, which I could probably relate to this, and maybe you could relate, where you have like that social pressure of like, oh, well, what happened to him? You know, like, did he do something wrong? And then you're like, man, I did it, you know. But it's definitely something that affects someone to the core, and I can definitely relate to you. So, Ash, what was your perspective of love before you met Melvin?
So for me, it was different from his story, of course. I came from basically a broken home. My family's Christian all their lives, but when I was 12, my parents split up, and I kind of went through a rough patch, and that's even hard to say.
Go ahead.
But I didn't really feel loved.
Got it.
But it was hard, you know, you don't feel the love that a child needs, or when you're growing up, you don't feel it as much. So in my household, we wouldn't hug each other, so I wouldn't feel that love that someone needs. I guess it started from an early age for me. But going into relationships, I was looking for something else. I was looking for something different, and I wouldn't even find that in anybody else. So I went through my moments of trial and different relationships and seasons, that when I finally came to Visible definitely helped me in so many ways. I came here and I started falling in love with Jesus again. I started to fall in love with him more and more, and that when I met Melvin, I was able to feel the love. I was able to see the difference in him through Christ, obviously. And yeah, it definitely changed my perspective of love once Melvin came into my life, and I accepted God back into my life as well.
Amen. And I think that that's so important because I feel like we're always looking for love in someone else. And I think that you said something that was key. You didn't have that in your life, but there was a moment in your life that you got to a moment where you started connecting with Christ, and He became the center of your life, to the point that He is your source of happiness. And a lot of times in relationships, we get that wrong. We always try to find happiness in someone, and in reality, is that person is not gonna always make you happy. That's life, you know, and that's something that even we share in our marriage, where we're like, hey, you know, it's gonna be one of those days that I'm just not gonna be in a mood, you know, I'm just not. But you know, your spouse cannot be your source of happiness. Tu pareja no puede ser tu único recurso de felicidad. Esa felicidad solo la encuentras en el Señor y tú la compartes con tu pareja. So you share happiness with your spouse or with someone that you're meeting, but you never look for happiness in them, because you're going to end up being, they're going to fail you. You know, you're going to have some unmet expectations. So then you guys both have these experiences with your past. So how was it when you guys connected? So now you guys meet each other, and all of a sudden, like, this is a completely different relationship, right? So how was your perspective changed when you guys met each other?
Okay, I think that you just know. For me, when I first met Melvin, after going through so many different relationships and going through my fails and my trials, when I finally met Melvin, I finally felt like God had just literally just placed him there for me. Like, I didn't go looking for him. He just kind of appeared on Instagram. But I think it's really good.
Okay, so yeah, let's say something. So no, basically yo creo que por lo menos cuando comenzamos a conocernos, yo creo que cuando yo comienzo a conocer la historia, lo que es Ashley, basically es algo totalmente distinto a lo que yo estaba acostumbrado. Desde lo más mínimo, desde lo más sencillo, el trato, la manera en cómo ella me hablaba, comencé a enamorarme de ella, comencé a enamorarme de su simplicidad, tan simple, tan frágil. Eso era algo que yo le pedí a Dios. Hasta el sol de hoy yo creo que sí hemos tenido muchas ups and downs en el poco, ¿verdad? Diría poco tiempo. Hay noviazgos que duran 5, 6, 7 años. El de nosotros duró 1 y medio antes de, ¿verdad?, casarnos y todo lo demás. Pero sí pasamos por muchas cosas y el conocernos ha sido una de las bendiciones más grandes. Creo que cuando pude ver a Ashley, pude ver esa bendición de la que Dios me estaba preparando en ese momento difícil que tuve. Y a veces nosotros, cabeciduros, me pasa que cuando ya tú entras por la puerta que Dios te preparó, esa puerta de bendición, esa oportunidad de bendición, a veces queremos traer el pasado y arrastrarlo a nuestro presente, cuando ya eso murió. ¿Sabes? Ya eso no puede ser parte de lo que Dios tiene en el presente. Y eso fue lo que me pasó tan pronto como comencé a conocer a Ashley, nos hacemos novios y todo lo demás. Pude ver que en la promesa, ahí pude encajar todo. Ok, Dios me trae acá, y además de todas las cosas, el trabajo y todo lo demás, sí me ayudó y me presentó literalmente, me abrió la puerta para poder conocer a la mujer de mis sueños. Y ya.
But I think that, you know, una de las cosas más valiosas en experiencias como esta, one of the things that I find of value in experiences like this, for those that live a life that put Christ in the center of everything that they do, suffering is always going to have purpose. Para aquellos que viven una vida que siguen a Jesús, el sufrimiento siempre tiene propósito. And I feel like even in your lives, you're able to now look at what you have and what God gave you, and compare that to all of this stuff that you experienced in the past. And it makes you appreciate what God has given you so much more. Because you have a comparison. You're like, oh yeah, none of this stuff ever mattered. Like all of these things were, it was counterfeit love, eran amores que no eran reales, eran experiencias oscuras en mi vida, pero ahora cuando yo veo lo que el Señor me ha dado, te hace apreciar lo que Dios te puso y tu relación. So, I think that it's super important for us to understand that. For what would you tell someone that is probably in that season where they're like, man, I haven't found the one, I keep looking for love in the wrong places. Like, what would you tell someone that's probably struggling especially on Valentine's Day?
Yeah. So basically, por lo menos en mi caso, lo que yo aprendí, lo que yo le podría decir a alguien que está en esa etapa de buscar, o está desesperado, literalmente, aunque se escuche clichoso, dejarlo en las manos de Dios. Literalmente, no dejarte llevar por tu propia prudencia, por tu propio gusto, por lo que tú quieres buscar en lo humano, en lo que es la carne o lo que tú estés buscando, no. Yo aprendí literalmente a dejarlo en las manos de Dios, literalmente. Dios, literalmente, preséntame a esa persona que tú tienes para mí, porque yo no quiero volver a cometer otro error, yo no quiero volver a caer en lo mismo, yo no quiero volver a caer en depresión. Simplemente que Dios tome control de lo que Él tiene literalmente para ti. A veces no dejamos a Dios que tome control. A veces decimos, Dios, toma el control, pero nosotros queremos seguir guiando. O sea, la realidad es que eso es algo que yo aprendí, a soltarlo todo, a descansar en Dios y que sea Él ayudándome, literalmente, o en algún momento, darme la oportunidad de poder presentarme a esa persona que Él tiene para mí, para mi vida y para mi futuro.
Yeah, I would say the same thing, just waiting on God's timing.
Amen. So now, update of where you're at right now. Fast forward, you guys are married now.
Married.
It's been a month, right? Hace un mes se casaron y están celebrando esta primera etapa. Así que denle un aplauso a Melvin y a Andrea. So, we wanted to share their story because I feel like their story is very similar to kind of like what we experience in our relationship, and a lot of times I hear a part of Melvin's story and I'm like, man, that connects so much with our story, or hear Ash's story and we feel like it connects. So for those of you that don't know, Andrea and I, we've been together for about 11 years now. So tell us how we met. Tell the crowd, how do we meet?
You found me on MySpace. It wasn't
Wow.
Instagram, it was MySpace. I'm doing English, by the way, today, guys. For you, Danny. So, I moved from Puerto Rico. My dad, he was the bishop in Puerto Rico, and we moved here to Orlando. I started going to a church, and Jonathan happened to be in the same church. But I didn't like him back then. He liked me.
No.
He didn't.
No, that wasn't.
So,
I didn't like him.
So we became close because he was one of the closest friends with my older brother, and so we just happened to hang out, and I think it was church. It was a church experience.
Yeah. So we
had another boyfriend back then.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make that boyfriend jealous, so I told Jonathan, "Can you come to banquet with me on camp?"
So we used to.
That is true, though.
We met through church, and when we met, I became best friends with her brother, Angel, and we would always hang out all the time. And a year after that, we go to these youth summer camps. And Andrea was like, "Who are you going to banquet with?" Which is this thing that they do in church camps. It's like a prom, I guess. And I was like, "Oh, no one," And she was like, "Well, we should go together, as friends." And I was like, "Sure, whatever, why not?" So we went to this banquet, but we literally did not like each other. We sat down, we ate, and then we went our own ways. And it was after that, I think it was a month after that
we started to, we were going to the convention, a big convention that we do, and we happened to be in the same bus, and we started talking on our way back from Texas. We were to Texas, and when we were coming back from the convention, we started talking. It was like, how many hours?
I think it was 20 hours.
And Jonathan talks a lot, and I talk a lot, so you can imagine, we didn't stop talking.
What, are you going to tell him or am I going to tell him?
yeah, I said, oh, I like you.
Ah.
I said it first.
So,
Why not, girls?
Was you?
so ella era la que estaba enchulada. She was head over heels for me. You know, she was just, I tell you, she was telling everybody around us that she liked me. And so she told me first, and she was like, you know, hey, you know, I like you. And then I was like, huh,
I like you too.
I think I like you too. So all of a sudden we started dating, and this was, mind you, this was at 2008. So we've been together since 2008. Desde 2008 estamos juntos. So in our relationship, something very unique happens. I come from also like Ash said, a dysfunctional family. Our parents split up when I was 10. So my dad lived in Puerto Rico. We moved here with my mom. So I didn't have like that father figure, a presence in my life, at least on those like crucial years. So for me, I never had that example. So we were very young, very immature.
And came from completely different backgrounds also, because my parents raised me in church. I was always the daughter of the pastor, then the daughter of the bishop. I'm still the daughter of the bishop. So here. So we came from different backgrounds completely.
So in that, we made many mistakes. I think we broke up like maybe like 6 or 7 times. We were always arguing. We were always, you know, just things happen. It was not a good relationship. But after the years pass, something unique happens.
So things start to get serious. I mean, we mature. We were like, what, 8? No, we were like 17 when I was 17 or 16. Yeah. 16 when we started. So we start, you know, growing, and we start getting serious. Jonathan gets, you know, he has a calling to be in ministry, and he starts getting serious, and we get engaged.
So I'm already knowing that God is calling me to be a pastor, and I'm taking that very serious. But in that season, I started preparing to get engaged with Andrea. So I kid you not, you guys can look at this on YouTube. I made the most lavish engagement that you could ever imagine. Yo hice un proposal de eso que se fue viral. It went viral on social media. Like it was.
He had like the helicopter thing recording. Telemundo went to cover it. He made like a fake photo shoot. So I thought I was a model for a day, and it was just him on a top of
a rooftop of a parking garage
in downtown, and he was waiting with all my friends, the whole family.
Wow.
So think about this. Think about this.
That's
it was. I think we were like either 30 or 40 people there, right? Like of her closest friends and family and all that stuff. And you know, I get on one knee. I ask her for her hand in marriage. She obviously says yes. And then from there we start planning this wedding, right? So it wasn't until we went to Puerto Rico, because we were going to get married in Puerto Rico, that things started kind of like...
Started to get real for me. So we go to Puerto Rico. We wanted to get married in Puerto Rico. We travel, and when we're over there, I'm like, I kind of don't want to get married. I don't tell him this, but I start feeling like I'm not ready. You know, my dad is like, you know, we need to plan the wedding, Andrea, where are we going to do it also? So my dad is telling me this, and I'm like, things are real for real. So what are you going to do, Andrea? So like 2 months passed after that engagement. It was in December. And on February, I told him to come home, right? To come to my house, to my parents' house. And I went to the back with him, and I told him, hey, listen, I want to postpone the wedding. I didn't tell him I wanted to cancel the wedding. But I was like, you know, I'm not ready to get married. I just think we should postpone. Obviously, the same thing. Things about ministry were getting real to me also, and at that point, I felt like I didn't want to know about church. I just wanted to be a normal person. I didn't want to be the pastor's wife. I didn't want to go through that hassle, and I was like, I don't think I'm the right person for him either. So I said, I want to postpone the wedding. Didn't want to cancel, but I really wanted to cancel.
So it was after, I believe, 8 years of relationship. So she tells me this announcement, right? And I'm just looking I just start laughing.
¿Cómo tú te sentiste en ese momento? O sea,
I was in shock. I was in shock because in my mind, I'm like, it's been too long, you know. And everybody would tell us, like every time we would go to church, you know, we would have a viejita. Hey, when are you gonna marry Andrea? You know, like, coge las cosas en serio. And I'm like, I'm working on it, you know. And I need to get my life together. So for me, I also had this perspective that I needed, you know, as a minister or as a future pastor, that I needed to have life figured out. You know, like no one could know that I'm vulnerable or that I'm going through something so in that season, which is something that I learned after our broken engagement, like I would never share. Like there was a season in my life that I lived in a hotel for like 6 months with my mom and no one knew, you know, as far as everyone knows, like I'm doing good in life. So I think for me, I was just shocked. I couldn't believe it. And I feel like, you know, you have this sense like te da como un taco and like uneasiness, you know, that you're just like, man, I can't believe this is happening.
It's like you're dreaming a bad dream. And after that, I think he started realizing like how can she tell me after 8 years that she doesn't want to get married with me? So he asked me, he called me like 3 days, no, I think like a week after.
Yeah.
And he's like, give me the ring back.
So I said I want the ring back. I mean, I paid a lot for that ring, so I was like, no, mira, dos vacas con
I cried a lot after he asked me for the ring back because I wanted to stay with the ring. I'm just
Cuando ella te dice eso, tú pensaste que era el final, ¿sabes? Tú dijiste, ok, esta relación no va para ningún lado, no hay break, there's no way we can get back together.
So el primer mes, no. El primer mes yo estaba con todas las esperanzas del mundo. Like I was like hoping for something to happen.
She's gonna come back.
She's gonna come back, but it was like rejection after rejection after rejection after like so we got to the point that I was like, you know, we need to split up. This is over. So I think that from there we both went through what we would call the biggest seasons of our lives. We both experienced very different things. So I wanna share kind of what I experienced first because I feel like it's going to connect with what Andrea experienced. So we were broken up, and about a month after we broke up, no one knew about this. Like none of my friends knew. Like no one from my church knew, because at that time Andrea was going to another church. So it wasn't like people were, you know. So something happens. Un domingo en la iglesia, this lady comes up to me, like out of nowhere. Be careful with those viejitas in church, I'm telling you. Those viejitas, man, they know what they're doing. So this lady grabs me by my hand, and she takes me outside of church. Mind you, if you don't know this, I'm a very skeptical Christian in the sense, like, you know, I don't dwell a lot on the mystical stuff. You know, I don't, you know, when someone says, hey, I have a word from God, I'm like, okay, what is it? You know, like I'm always doubtful about those things. I see God's word, I'm like, God, thank you for your word. You speak to me every day through it. I'm good, you know. So this lady says, you know, God has been waking me up at night, and you're in my mind. I've been praying for you for about a month. Mind you, we broke up in a month. And she says, I'm like, oh, great, thank you. You know, she's like, I'm praying for you, I'm fasting for you. Oh, great, thank you, I appreciate it. And then she says, Andrea doesn't want to be with you. And I was like, whoa, how do you know this? You know, I start getting like not upset, but I started getting shocked. And she was very detailed. She said she doesn't want to be with you. She's running away from her calling. She's running away from God. Stop looking for her. And in my heart, I'm like, whoa, what's going on? You know, like, what's going on, God? So she said, but God showed me in this dream that God's going to do something in her life, and she will be back. Right? She said, that's all I gotta tell you. So she leaves, right? That sounds very poetic, but it doesn't sound poetic when you don't see it happen. It doesn't sound very comforting when when God promises you something and you don't see what He promised you, and you're waiting, and not just waiting for like a week, like waiting. So it was a word from God. It was a very direct word from God, but I think that I experienced a season where I didn't see that. So that was connected with what Andrea experienced. So what was your after engagement experience?
So I walked completely away from God. I mean, I would go here and there to a church, to an American church, but I walked away from God, and I started a relationship with a person, a very toxic relationship, abusive, mentally and emotionally, and I was in that hole, like in a dark place. But maybe at the beginning I didn't see it until I started experiencing a lot of stuff.
So you get yourself in a toxic relationship. So do you feel like walking away from God made you not be aware of the warning signs of getting into that relationship?
I could tell you, I have my sister, like she told me the whole time, you are not in the right place. So when someone that loves you sees it, that's walking with you in the midst of everything, I would cry 7 days a week. I was not happy. I found my value in that person, and I knew it was a toxic relationship because it was so hard for me to get out of there. And I would see the mistreatment. I would see that I was not happy, that I would cry a lot, but at one point you make it normal. You make it like, oh, this is okay. But you know it's not okay, because if something is pushing you away from God, then it's not godly. Then it's not okay. If something is making you feel that way, even if the person keeps saying sorry, you know it's not godly. You know it's not what God has for you. And I knew it. I think after some time I started noticing that, oh my God, I'm in a hole that I'm not going to be able to get out.
How long were you in this relationship? Just so that people in the crowd may.
For
almost a year?
Yeah. For almost a year.
So you get yourself in a place where you walk away from God. Kind of had like a prodigal son experience where you're saying, I don't want to know anything about you. Give me my inheritance. I'm gonna walk away. I'm gonna do my thing. I'm gonna do all the things that I didn't do before. Get yourself in this relationship. How did you feel when you were in this relationship?
Emotionally draining. All the time I could say I was sad. I mean, you go through ups and downs, and the person might make you feel like he's sorry or she's sorry, or things are gonna change, but you see that there's nothing in their relationship that you could say this is okay. And I felt like I had no value as a woman, that my life was not worth it anymore. I didn't want to live anymore. I wanted my life to be over. And I am someone that loves life, that honestly, I'm very, you guys know me. The people that know me know that I love life. And when I found myself like trying to look for professional help and saying, you know what, at one point I was driving home and I just wanted to crash my car with something and just, forget about everything else. So my value was not there as a woman, because I thought my value came from someone else, and I didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Partiendo de la premisa que tú sabías que ese no era el lugar que tú debías estar, ¿qué tú sentías que te impedía salir de ahí, ¿sabes?
You just feel like you're in that hole, and it's so crazy because you just feel like you don't know how to get out. You just don't know. You just don't find an exit.
You want to, but you don't know.
Exactly. You want to, and you're like, okay, what do I have to do? I have to do this as a human, then I have to do this as, look for help, professional help, and then because you were raised in church, or if you know about God, that the final answer, and the answer is God. Run to God. He's waiting for you with open arms, just like a prodigal son experience, just like that. But you don't see that at that point.
Yeah, and I think that for her, one of the things that was the toughest was that it was finding value. When you're in a toxic relationship and someone is always putting you down, making you number two, making you feel like you're worthless. I think that in her experience it was really tough, to try and like drag yourself out of it. And I think people underestimate seasons like this. I think that people also underestimate when you are in a toxic relationship, because there's no getting out of it, unless there's a divine intervention. And it's like Andrea and I were talking about this the other day. Have you ever seen the series You? ¿Alguna vez han visto la serie You?
Yeah.
The guy is a serial killer, right? But we all like him. El tipo es un asesino en serie, pero todos nos llevamos con él. Él es tremenda persona, like.
No quieres que lo coja la policía.
Exactly. You don't want to get caught because you like him. And the reality is that when you're in a relationship like this, at first, you like the bad guy. You like the villain, and what happens?
Like Thanos.
Yeah.
Everybody loves Thanos. Quiere acabar con la mitad de la humanidad, pero todo el mundo ama Thanos.
So what happens is when you're in a toxic relationship, society has made it seem like the villain is a victim.
Mm-hmm.
La sociedad hace que el villano sea una víctima. So when you look at the person and you're in a toxic relationship, you're like, oh, well, he's a victim, oh, he's acting like this because it's me, he's acting like, or this person's like that because maybe I'm not doing something or whatever.
And you go through those feelings. You feel like bad for the person, and at one point you're like finding a way to get out, but I'm like, oh my God, no, I feel bad. How can I do this? And you start looking for positives where there's no positive. And I think that's when this is not a right relationship, that you're not walking in the right direction.
Yeah. So I think that as she's going through this toxic relationship, I still got one promise from God, and I'm so frustrated because.
¿Cómo te sentiste en ese momento?
En
ese momento de espera.
Pues los meses pasan y you don't see it, and I would see, people would be like, oh, you know where Andrea was at this weekend, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to know, and people.
That's the worst.
It was just horrible, and again and now I'm at a point that I went through a lot of highs and lows. I went through some days that I was God started opening doors in my ministry. Like I was preaching every weekend at different churches. But after that weekend experience, or even through the week or whatever, I would be depressed at home, and I would be asking God, like, God, why am I going through this? Mm-hmm. Is she really the woman that you have for me? Because if not, like, just tell me. Because if you tell me, I'm good. I let it be. I go find someone else. You would say something.
¿Tú crees que este proceso, si no es el más, fue uno de los más que te ayudó para aprender a confiar en Dios?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that in this season I was able to find that Job experience. If you've never read the book of Job, si nunca has leído el libro de Job y su historia, it's a beautiful story of finding purpose in suffering. And I think I found that, like even in my highs and lows, there was one thing that was always in my mind. God is still God. Había algo que en mi altas o en mi bajas yo tenía algo presente. Dios, He is who He is. I might be going through a low, but He's still sitting on the throne. He's still God. He still has purposes for my life. And even in a season of silence, I still found value in that. I still found value in silence.
And the interesting part is that you knew the end. Tú sabías for a fact que ella iba a volver.
Yeah.
Pero sabiendo ese final, es un proceso totalmente, me imagino que es un proceso totalmente largo de aprender a confiar en Dios.
Yeah.
Like, literalmente lo que Él te dijo.
Yeah.
Porque peor es cuando tú no sabes que al final se ella va a volver o no.
Yeah.
But you know it for a fact. So,
Yeah.
aprender a confiar en Dios,
Yeah.
aprender a esperar. Que eso es algo que no muchos de nosotros sabemos en procesos de nuestra vida.
Mm-hmm.
O sea, a veces sabemos el final, sabemos la recompensa que Dios nos va a dar, pero aún así nos desesperamos, nos desviamos de su promesa. Dejamos de confiar en Él.
So what was your turning point?
I honestly, at the end I had to let God intervene, and I had to really let Him, as hard as it was. I was like, you know what, God, take this person out, whatever you have to do. And I'm not gonna go into details of what happened, but literally God said, I'm taking this person out of your life. And it was crazy. I kept going to the church, and I was telling Jonathan, I would go every Sunday and cry every Sunday because I felt like God was speaking to me every single Sunday. So I decided to let God intervene and let, honestly, my life be directed by God and say, you know what? You have to let go, because if not, you don't want to see yourself in 5 years. You don't want to see yourself in 2 years. And I think that was the turning point, and truly, truly let God intervene in my life and let Him, take me out of that.
So would you say that as you were experiencing God and making Him number one in your life, everything else started lining up?
It was hard. It wasn't easy, but yeah, it started lining up, and I started feeling and seeing the things that God was doing for me to have.
Okay, so now we're obviously here and we're married. How did we get back together?
You kept trying.
No.
No, I was like, I would tell my Mom, there's this camp. I didn't want to go to the camp, but I wanted to see Jonathan. So my mom drove me 4 hours and a half to Georgia to go find Jonathan and talk to him in this camp. And I knew there was a process. I knew it was not going to be easy. I knew that I have to be honest. I knew I had to share my experience with him, because that is part of the process of God, of the healing and forgiveness. And I found Jonathan. You want to say your part of the story?
So I'm serving at this camp, right? And all of a sudden, I have a walkie-talkie, and people are like, Jonathan, where are you? Jonathan, where are you? And I'm like, I'm doing stuff, and they're like, Andrea's here, and she's looking for you. And I'm like, dile a la boca esa que me deje quieto. Jonathan, leave me alone. I'm not gonna see her. And I started doing my thing, and then I would see her, like, cause we drive these golf carts. It's a big campground, and I would drive by her, and she'll be like, and I'm like, whatever, like. So with everybody kept telling me, Andrea's looking for you. Andrea wants to talk to you. And all of a sudden,
Andrea found him.
So de la nada me llama un pastor amigo y me dice, hey, I need to see you en este lugar. So I'm like, okay. I thought it was an issue, something happened with a camper or something. When I get there, the pastor's sitting there with Andrea next to him, and I'm like, dude, seriously, you set me up? I'm like, and I sit down, and she's like, how you doing? So I'm doing good, and she's like, so, have you moved on? And I'm like,
first question.
Yeah, I'm like, what
do
do
you
you
have someone else?
Yeah, I'm like, what do you care? And I was like, you know what? I don't have time for this, so I left. But one of the things that was key to this, mind you, this is a week experience, is that she goes and she talks to my youngest brother, one of my young brothers, Abdiel. And Abdiel le dice, Andrea, do you want to be with Jonathan? And I think you said yes, right? And he was like, let me tell you, girl, your tank is empty. Like, you're about to lose this guy. Like, if you don't talk to him this week, it's over. He's gonna meet someone that, he's gonna get married, and you're done. Like, if this is your opportunity. So
he also told me, and that person's gonna cook, and you don't know how to cook. Okay.
So from that experience, even in that week, for those people that were there, Sally was there, my brother was there, that's here. We started seeing an Andrea that we've never seen before. We started seeing an Andrea that was in love with Christ, that was in love with Jesus. We started seeing an Andrea that was engaged in all of these aspects of a Christian life. And it was on Thursday before we left that she says, I need to talk to you again, and I'm like, here we go. So then when she comes up to me, she tells me, she says, hey, I need to talk to you about something. I went through a season where I went far from God. Yo le di la espalda a Dios y te di la espalda a ti. She said, I turned my back against God, and I also did you. Because I turned my back against God, I also did to you. And she said, I went through a really dark season in my life where I would like to talk to you about it in the future. but I just want you to know that God has been doing something in my life, and all of a sudden, every single word that woman told me a month after we broke up, I hear from her mouth a year and a half after. And she's like, God has been working in my life. I'm not telling you this because of you. I'm telling you this because this is who I am now. Like, I am rooted in Him. And I just want you to know that I'm sorry for everything that happened. And that if you're willing to take me back, I will do whatever it takes to show you that I love you, to show you that I want to do life with you, to show you that I want to do ministry with you. And it was in that moment that I knew that it was from God. So I told her, knowing that it was from God, I said, I'll think about it. So I told her, hey, we'll think about it. And I remember going back to my room with my friends that we were in the cabin together. And one of my best friends, Tommy, he tells me, so you talked to Andrea? I said, yeah. And he said, what happened? I said, she wants to get back with me. And he said, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to get back with her. So that Friday morning, we spoke. And we got back together. So one of the things that I was able to even experience through that week and through these conversations was believing in God. When he has a word over your life, it might not be now, it might be in a year, 2 years, but man, it will come to pass. So from there, we get back together.
Yeah, we get back together. I mean, it was, like starting again, but fast, because we got married not even a year after.
Yeah, 7 months after.
But I had to be honest with him. And I remember before even telling him everything, I was driving with him from Tampa to Orlando, and I asked him, what would I say that would make you not be with me? And he said, there's nothing you could say that would make me not be with you. And I started experiencing the forgiveness of God, because I was going through a process of healing and forgiving myself. And I think through there, and when I was able to be completely honest with Jonathan and open, and he saying he forgave me, I think I saw the forgiveness of God through Jonathan.
So one of the things that was happening in that season is I noticed that you had like como un cargo de conciencia, if you could call it, or there was something in her heart that was like a burden, and I knew that she needed to share something with her, with me. So I knew that there was something in her heart that she needed to open up and share, but she was still afraid of doing that. So that's when she tells me that, and she says, what is there anything that I could share with you that's going to make me not forgive you? And I told her no.
How did you get to that point de decir literalmente poder confiar en Dios, literalmente plenamente en Dios, y decir, o sea, cualquier cosa que tú me digas no me va a volver a hacer a dudar, no me va a volver a hacer turning back again, como que decir, ok, no, yo creo que debemos esperar, debemos darle un hold a esto, yo tengo que primero aprender a confiar en ti, porque pasaron ciertas cosas que obviamente en lo humano, la duda, el temor, pasar otra vez, no pasar otra vez, ella se irá de nuevo. How do you get to that point?
So this is where it gets fun. So let me tell you something, for those of you that are in this place. A love that is rooted in Christ is shown by forgiveness. Un amor que está centrado en Cristo, un amor real, un amor genuino, real love, genuine love, is not disconnected from forgiveness.
Wow.
You cannot love and not forgive. If not, that's a counterfeit love. So I think that love is a decision that you make. It's a decision. And the moment that we got back together, we both were on the same page. We're making this happen. We're making this work. So in my mind, there was never a thought in my mind that said, she's gonna leave me or it won't happen. Because again, not tooting my own horn, but what I'm telling you is I know what real love is. I know the love of Christ. And that love pushes me to forgive all offenses. So for us, it was like, and I told her this, I said, hey, we're doing this together. The Word of God says that, the man shall leave mother and father, unite himself with his wife, and they'll become one. So for me and her, and this is something that I assured her in the process of her healing, that we were saying, we're doing this together. Like, your healing is your season of healing is my season. So it wasn't like we were like disconnected, or it wasn't like we weren't, not, I wasn't looking at her process as her own. I was looking at our process. What's yours? No. So from there, we started working on conquering all of these things. We made it our emphasis, our focus, and we started working as one unit. And I tell you, there was not a moment in our relationship that I doubted the decision that we made. There was not a moment that we were saying, this is not from God, or thinking double thinking about what was going to happen. It was just
Okay, sorry. So, en este proceso donde ustedes están viviendo ahora, ya mencionaste algo que obviamente no ha habido una oportunidad donde de momento digan como que esto no es de Dios, de momento, pero en el caso de Andrea, ¿tú has traído de momento, bring back some stuff from that past, en esta temporada que ustedes están viviendo ahora?
No, just like when we talked, and we got back together, we knew that we wanted to share our story and testimony, and obviously we're sharing part of it. In a marriage retreat, we will share more. But no, just now it's part of our story, it's part of our testimony.